What is going on? So I was going through my channel recently and I noticed it's been over a year since I've made a video about why you shouldn't move to New Hampshire. So I wanted to take that video idea, re-update it, and kind of tell it to you guys again because it's a little bit of a different story in the past year and a half or so. So if you're someone that's looking to relocate from out of state, in this video I'm going to be going over the top 5 gripes I hear from people that have actually relocated to New Hampshire from a different part of the country and kind of what they have told me about the disappointments of New Hampshire, something they didn't expect, or again, something they were just let down of because they, well, were used to it where they came from. And after you watch this video, if you're not fully deterred from moving to New Hampshire, please feel free to reach out. I would love to help you in the relocation process because it's great to have a good real estate agent on your side to handle a lot of the communication, because moving from a whole different state can be pretty stressful and just a lot of moving pieces. So it's good to get some real professionals on your side. And again, before I dive into these 5 topics, I want to just reiterate that this is some gripes that I have heard from people that have moved from out of state. A lot of them are from like bigger cities, kind of just places where there's more population, because some cities people move to have the same population as the whole state of New Hampshire. So I'm going to be diving into these 5 right now. Number 1 is the lack of affordable housing. Now, as of a few weeks ago, the median sales price in New Hampshire for a single family house is right about $445,000. This is up over $75,000 from where it was just 2 years ago at the start of 2022, where that was right about $370,000. So as you can see, affordability is becoming a problem. And now this is kind of the same deal with renting, where yes, affordability is a problem, but the bigger problem is just there isn't anywhere to rent, because affordability can kind of range, of course, from where you're actually located in, because the bigger cities are going to have a way higher rent than something way out in the boondocks where you're on a dirt road. But just for an example, something like Cuisine, you're looking at a 2-bedroom, you're probably anywhere from $1,500 to $1,700, depending on if anything's included like heat, electric, that type of stuff. But if you move to Manchester, because it's a bigger city, well, instead of 15 to 17, you're probably looking at 2,000 to 2,200 for a 2-bedroom. So as you can see, depending on where you are, it can range a lot. And if you're in one of the smaller towns with an old landlord that doesn't really pay attention, he just wants to get his money, maybe the house is paid off, you can probably find something honestly around 1,200 to 1,400. But again, it's just finding it. It's going to be the problem, because the biggest thing with the lack of affordable housing is just the lack of housing. That's one big problem in New Hampshire right now, is we're just short on housing. We have to build more, and the problem is the stuff that is built right now, people living in it, nobody wants to move because they got such a low interest rate when they purchased. And interest rates right now, they're like, why would I sell with a low interest rate to go buy a bigger house that's more expensive with a higher interest rate? So that's a big reason of why we have the lack of affordable housing, is because we just have a lack of housing in general. Number 2 is going to be boring cuisine. New Hampshire is not the most diverse state by any means. That's just to put it in simple terms. It's not very diverse. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record on a few of these points, because most of the state has these things, except when you're in the bigger cities. Sometimes you'll find some good food and good ethnic food because, well, there's actually different ethnicities there. And a lot of those are in like Manchester, Nashua. They'll have some decent food. But everywhere else, it's been a frustration for me for really my entire life, because I like trying, I'm not a big foodie, but I do like trying new food. I like trying new experiences and seeing what's out there. I went to Vegas last winter or last spring, somewhere around there. Oh my goodness, there were so many different types of food. I was in heaven just eating everything. I ate a lot of food and gained some weight, not as much as I thought, but I was pounding it back. Luckily, I was hiking every day to kind of offset that. But that's something New Hampshire completely lacks, is really good, just different types of food. They're just very boring, and it kind of is what it is. Of course, again, bigger cities, you're going to have a little bit more of a selection, but if you're in these little small towns, you're probably having a pizzeria. Number 3 is no nightlife. And when I say no nightlife, I mean like no nightlife. So again, not trying to sound like a broken record. If you're in a bigger city like Manchester, you might find some good spots. But most of the time, a lot of people are driving all the way to Boston if they want to have a true night out with nightlife, because a lot of these towns, they're just so small. They might have a local bar where it's just the locals there who've been going there for 20 years. Even in Keene, this is a college town, so you do have a tiny bit of nightlife, but it's like 2 or 3 bars. And again, if you go there in the summer, it's going to be way more dead than when the school is actually in and there's college kids there, because that really brings the crowd. So there's not really any nightlife. If you're looking for that, New Hampshire's probably not the best bet for you. Before I get to point number 4, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as it helps the channel grow and you don't miss another real estate related video. Now back to number 4, no airport and really no public transportation. So I just coupled these together because there are some small airports throughout New Hampshire. Some of them are private. I think the biggest of the smallest one is probably Manchester. You got a little bit of an airport, but I think it only goes to certain locations in the country. I've never flown out of it because usually the flights are way more expensive because you have to get on such a particular flight. So I usually just drive down to Boston, fly out of Boston. For me, I live in Keene, which is the way west corner of the state. So I have to drive all the way across. It's about 2-hour travel time just to get to the airport to have a full day of travel. So it can be a little bit of a pain, but hey, at least Boston's down there. And if you're in like more central New Hampshire, towards the southern part, it's like an hour to Boston, hour and a half. So depending on where you are, it's not terrible, but it's just something to keep in mind. There's no major airports. Now for public transportation, you might find some buses here and there. Like Keene has a few buses. I think it's mainly for elderly people that don't have cars. I think Concord has some buses. And again, the bigger cities are going to have very limited bus routes. You do have things like Uber, Lyft, those type of things. I've never got one. I have no clue. Maybe you have to wait a little bit. I don't really know. I have a car here, so I have no need for it, but I know I have seen them around here. And now the last point we're going to touch on is number 5, and that is weather. So just to preface this topic of weather, I'm going to just say something that I might hate might be the ideal situation for you. It might be the whole reason why you want to move to New Hampshire. And that biggest thing is the winter. I don't like the winter. There's snow outside right now. I don't do any activities in the snow. The only things I do in the snow is walk my dog, and instead of being in the warm weather, I'm now freezing cold, or I shovel the snow. So it's not very fun for me. But if you're an avid snowboarder, skier, like to snowmobile, ice skate, I don't know, any of those things, you would love it. I just don't do those things. So I kind of don't like the winter. Now, of course, that's not the only season we get. That is a good thing about New Hampshire, is you experience all 4 seasons. And you experience them pretty fully. They're all good. And like summers do get hot. But we started with winter, so now we'll go spring. Spring is great. The only big downside about spring is when all the snow melts. New Hampshire has a decent amount of dirt roads. So a lot of smelting snow creates a lot of muddy dirt roads. So depending on where you live, of course, you might not have to go on any dirt roads. No big deal. The things you would have to worry about are frost heaves in the road, which is basically where the winter causes the road to get so cold it splits, and then you basically just have a bunch of potholes that you're hitting. So it's either mud or potholes, but those are the things you kind of have to worry about in the springtime. Then for summer, it does get hot in New Hampshire. If you have no clue, we are a northern state, of course, but it gets warm. It rarely gets above 100 degrees, but we have humidity. So I know this from experience now. I was out in Las Vegas. That heat is so different than here. Like, I always was told about it when I was growing up, like, oh, we have humid heat. I was like, whatever. Dry heat and humid heat are very different. So even if it's only like 79 here, well, you're probably going to be sweating buckets because it gets humid. It's not as bad as Florida, but again, it's kind of like that. And the last one is fall. Fall, I think, is a great time. It's gorgeous. It's where the leaves change. And really the only biggest downside about fall is in the switch between summer and fall is when the bugs come out. So you get mosquitoes and black flies, which can be very annoying. And then the other downside, I suppose, is when the leaves change colors. People from other states like to drive to our state, to drive our roads, and look at them. They like to take their time, they drive very slowly, and it can get frustrating as a native New Hampshire person because it's just another day for you, but everyone else is having a grand old time driving 25 miles an hour. So that can get a little frustrating, but again, it's a gorgeous time of year. So that's the whole video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.